The USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group has been redirected from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East as tensions with Iran escalate. President Trump has issued stark warnings to Tehran regarding the treatment of protesters and Iran's nuclear program, stating, "We have a big force going toward Iran. I stopped 837 hangings. If you hang those people, you're going to be hit harder than you've ever been hit." According to marine tracking data, the nuclear-powered carrier crossed the Strait of Malacca and entered the Bay of Bengal before disabling its transponder. The 100,000-ton vessel carries approximately 90 combat aircraft and has essentially gone dark while advancing toward potential strike position. This deliberate operational security measure indicates heightened military readiness. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group includes the flagship USS Abraham Lincoln, 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, USS Spruance, USS Michael Murphy, and USS Frank E. Peterson, Jr., and is likely accompanied by a fast-attack nuclear submarine, though its identity remains classified. Carrier Air Wing 9 features F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters, FA-18E/F Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, E-2D Hawkeyes, CMV-22B Ospreys, and MH-60RS Seahawks. This represents significant strike capability including stealth operations, air superiority, electronic warfare, and precision strike missions. 12 F-15E Strike Eagles from RAF Lakenheath have deployed to Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, accompanied by 4 KC-135 Stratotanker refueling aircraft. These aircraft can carry between 23,000 and 29,000 pounds of ordnance, far exceeding the payload capacity of stealth fighters. CENTCOM confirmed the deployment, stating the F-15's presence enhances combat readiness and promotes regional security. The United States now has 3 Strike Eagle squadrons positioned in the region. Reports indicate strategic bombers have deployed to Diego Garcia, the joint US-UK base whose unusually long runways can accommodate heavy strategic bombers like B-2 Spirit aircraft capable of penetrating hardened underground targets. Increased C-17 Globemaster III transport flights to Diego Garcia and other regional bases suggest a significant influx of air defense systems, materiel, and personnel. Unconfirmed reports suggest the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Group may have departed Norfolk on January 13th, potentially doubling American carrier-based air power in theater. Open-source trackers estimate the Lincoln remains approximately 3 to 5 days from CENTCOM's area of responsibility, with potential arrival around January 24th, 26. This timeline positions the strike group for coordinated operations should military action be ordered. The assembled force package represents a layered strike capability: stealth B-2 bombers for deep underground facilities, F-35Cs for air superiority, EA-18G Growlers for radar jamming, F-15Es for heavy conventional payloads, FA-18 Super Hornets for close air support, and Tomahawk cruise missiles from destroyers and submarines. A former high-ranking U.S. military official described the potential operation as massive, stating, "First, we have to get forces there, then we would need to stage and employ them, then we need to sustain them, and we would have to be prepared to do all that for a long time. It would dwarf anything we have likely done in the recent past." This suggests an operation exceeding the scale of Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, or Syria operations. Trump has told advisors that if the United States takes military action in Iran, he wants swift and decisive results, avoiding prolonged conflict. This indicates a preference for overwhelming initial strikes designed to cripple Iran's ability to sustain operations. Multiple regional and American media accounts report U.S. carrier movements, bomber activity at Diego Garcia, and reinforced air defenses across the Gulf as officials coordinate contingency planning for Iranian retaliation. The Pentagon is expected to surge additional assets, with the added firepower serving both as deterrent and providing Trump additional options if he chooses strikes. However, several sources indicated long-running concerns among U.S. officials that the military didn't have the right mix of assets in place to protect against a potential massive retaliatory strike from Iran, particularly given that Trump surged significant military force to the Caribbean supporting Venezuela operations. Trump captured Venezuelan President Maduro on January 3rd, diverting substantial assets that must now reposition while simultaneously building up Middle East presence. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu informed the United States that Israel was not prepared to defend itself in the event of an Iranian response to American strikes, given insufficient U.S. military forces in the region to assist, as they did during the June 2025 conflict. During that war, Iran fired missiles that killed 32 Israelis and targeted Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where 10,000 American troops are stationed. Both nations anticipate Iran will retaliate massively if Trump orders strikes, making reinforcements essential. Reports indicate non-essential British and American personnel have been evacuated from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, supporting preparations for potential Iran operations. Personnel evacuations are among the clearest indicators that strikes may be imminent. The U.S. military has reinforced Patriot and THAAD missile defense batteries across Gulf states as part of preparations for Iranian response. Washington has tightened and augmented joint command centers with regional partners, including Israel. Iran possesses thousands of ballistic missiles capable of reaching Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Israel. Every American base and allied capital requires layered missile defense before strikes can begin. IDF operations and planning directorates, along with Israel's defense attachés, have intensified contacts with CENTCOM and Pentagon over the past 2 days, preparing for multiple scenarios. 3 new F-35I Adir stealth fighters landed at Nevatim Air Base, strengthening Israel's multi-layered defense posture. Social media reports note GPS disruptions over Iranian airspace and apparent use of electronic warfare intended to test systems, degrading Iranian radars and sensors. This represents reconnaissance preparing the battlefield through jamming tests before actual operations. From Iran's perspective, the signs are unmistakable. A massive American carrier strike group approaching, bombers at Diego Garcia, 3 F-15 squadrons in Jordan, evacuations from Qatar, air defenses reinforcing, and electronic warfare testing all point toward potential imminent action. Trump stated repeatedly over the past week that Iran halted executions and postponed hanging hundreds of protesters, framing this as why he didn't strike. However, military preparations have intensified simultaneously. Trump told reporters on January 16th, "Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact." Yet foreign outlets reported intensified covert preparations for large-scale operations in the last 2 days. American officials told the Jerusalem Post that all options are on the table, adding that the goal is creating significant force grouping in the region, providing Trump a wide range of options if he decides to strike Iran. The repositioning aligns with directives from CENTCOM to prepare for 24/7 major operational support over the next month as tensions with Iran reach a boiling point. This suggests not quick in-and-out strikes but sustained combat operations, indicating targeting not just nuclear sites, but potentially the entire IRGC command structure, missile arsenals, naval bases, and proxy networks. Trump's strike options run the gamut from surgical strikes on IRGC forces and Basij paramilitary troops to decapitation strikes on Ayatollah Khamenei to attacks on nuclear facilities. Going after Iran's air defenses and short-range standoff weapons could make future operations less risky. Any direct military action faces high risk of broad Iranian retaliation against U.S. bases in the Gulf, Israeli territory, and global energy infrastructure. When strikes begin, Iran would likely immediately launch ballistic missiles at Al Udeid, Al Dhafra, Prince Sultan Air Base, and Camp Lemonnier. Hezbollah could fire rockets from Lebanon into Israel. Houthi rebels might attack Saudi oil facilities and shipping in the Red Sea. Iraqi militias could assault the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. External pressure or removal of top leadership could actually strengthen Iranian internal cohesion and empower hardline factions like the IRGC, rather than fostering political moderation. Protests that began December 28th over rising prices and devalued currency appear to be dissipating in the wake of the regime's harsh response. Heavy police presence and deadly crackdowns have largely suppressed demonstrations, according to witnesses and human rights groups. By the time carrier forces arrive in strike position, the protests that initially triggered crisis rhetoric may have been crushed, raising questions about justification for attack beyond regime change, nuclear programs, or regional proxy concerns. Conflict in the Gulf would have a pronounced impact on global oil and gas markets, driven by heightened risk of supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea. Disruptions to tanker traffic could prompt coordinated military responses from regional and allied powers. 20% of global oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz daily. Iran has threatened to close it if attacked, which would spike oil prices above $200 per barrel, triggering global recession. Every country has an economic stake in preventing this conflict. Gulf Arab states, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Egypt, have all cautioned the United States against strikes. Russia and China warned at the UN Security Council that military action violates international law and risks catastrophic escalation. Cato Institute fellow John Hoffman warned that striking Iran risks entangling Washington in domestic upheaval without a clear endgame and endangering U.S. troops across the Middle East, noting that those clamoring for involvement will likely press for sustained engagement, ensuring the regime's demise. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Daryl Caudle underscored that the U.S. Navy can reposition carrier strike groups globally in under 2 weeks, highlighting operational flexibility and strategic reach central to American maritime power projection. Moving carriers from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf in 10 days demonstrates to China and Russia that America can concentrate overwhelming force anywhere on Earth rapidly. Both USS Theodore Roosevelt and USS George H.W. Bush left Norfolk within 48 hours in movements analysts suggest relate to heightened force posture requirements. Neither completed standard training exercises, underscoring the urgency. 3 carrier strike groups potentially converging on the Middle East would represent the largest American naval concentration since the Iraq invasion of 2003. Combined with bomber task forces and forward-deployed fighter wings, this creates a strike package capable of sustained operations against hardened targets across Iran. The arrival of a full carrier strike group provides a unique combination of sustained air power, electronic warfare, maritime strike capabilities, and sea control unmatched by other platforms. It functions as a floating air base capable of generating over 150 sorties daily for weeks. Iran must now activate all air defense batteries, disperse ballistic missiles to hardened mountain facilities, alert proxy forces across the region, prepare retaliatory strikes, shut down internet to prevent coordination with protesters, and wait for potential American action. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is advancing toward the Middle East while operating with its transponder disabled. The nuclear-powered carrier crossed the Strait of Malacca, entered the Bay of Bengal, then went dark. 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, a nuclear attack submarine, and carrier Air Wing 9 with F-35C stealth fighters, FA-18 Super Hornets, and EA-18G Growlers are expected to arrive in strike range January 24, 26. 12 F-15E Strike Eagles from RAF Lakenheath are positioned in Jordan with KC-135 tankers. Bombers have staged at Diego Garcia. C-17 transports are flooding the region with equipment. Unconfirmed reports suggest the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Group is also heading to the region, potentially creating the largest naval concentration since Iraq 2003. Non-essential personnel have been evacuated from Al Udeid in Qatar. Patriot and THAAD batteries have been reinforced across the Gulf. Command centers have been augmented. GPS disruptions and electronic warfare testing over Iran have been observed. Netanyahu informed the United States that Israel is not prepared to defend against Iranian retaliation without adequate American support, driving the massive force buildup. Strike options include surgical IRGC targets, decapitation operations, nuclear facilities, air defenses, or comprehensive campaigns against military infrastructure and proxy networks. Any direct action faces high risk of broad Iranian retaliation against U.S. bases, Israeli territory, and global energy infrastructure in the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil transits daily. Gulf states have warned against strikes. Russia and China have condemned potential intervention at the UN Security Council. Everything indicates a major Middle East military operation could begin once the Abraham Lincoln enters the Arabian Sea. Whether Trump orders an attack or this remains coercive deterrence will determine if 2026 sees regional war or tense standoff. The next 72 hours could prove decisive as American naval forces steam toward potential strike position against Iran.